Good morning and welcome to the Peace River, Manasota Regional Water Supply Authority Board of Directors meeting of December 2nd, 2020. Let the record show we're joined this morning by, from Manatee County by Mark Simpson, the Deputy Utility Director. Good morning, sir.
Thank you very much.
And all other commissioners are present. If you wish, please rise for the invocation to be delivered this morning by Commissioner Elton Langford, followed by the pledge.
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we just come to you today, Lord, and just thank you for a beautiful day. Lord, we ask that you give this board the wisdom and knowledge that it needs to make good, sound decisions, dear Heavenly Father, to help continue this authority in the right direction, Lord, and to serve the people that we represent. Lord, we ask that you be with our men and women that protect us and serve us, both at home and abroad, that you keep your hand of protection upon them at all times. And Lord, just let us pause during this time of the year, this special time of the year, Lord, that we could just mash the clutch in and remember what this season's all about there, Heavenly Father, and give praise and glory to you for the sacrifice that you made for us. We ask all these things now in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're at the place in our agenda now that we traditionally go around the room and let folks introduce themselves and who they represent. Start, Mandy. Miss Mandy, you can tell everybody who you are.
I'm Mandy Hines. I'm a county administrator for DeSoto.
Very good.
Good morning, Terry Holcomb with the authority.
Richard Anderson, Water Supply Authority.
Mike Coates with Water Supply Authority.
I'm Kevin Morris with Water Supply Authority. Alex Pagala with Hilltop Security.
And Lee, Water Supply Authority.
Good morning, Katie Duty with HDR.
Erin Hunt with HDR. Laura Donaldson, Manson Wallace, Donaldson Barn.
Clark Jones with Reese Engineering.
Eric Howard, Johnson Engineering.
Katie Gilmore, Nancy County.
Tom Trina, Ardura Group.
John Ferguson, Southwest Florida Water Management District.
Nicholas Scotland with the Water Authority.
Donald Morton with the Water Authority.
Mike Violet, Sarasota County.
Doug Morton, Water Authority. George Pennell, Water Authority.
Andy Kolvinschlag, Water Authority.
Potable, Water Authority.
Morning, I'm Heather Ripley from Kimley Horn.
Good morning, Doug Ekman with Kimley Horn.
Bob Cushing, Corolla Engineer.
Good morning, Tim Curran with AECOM.
Tom Wilson with Wade Trim.
Dorian Popescu with DMK. Templar.
Morning, Craig Rudy, Charlotte County.
Dennis Regasa, Swiftwood.
Good. I guess that's everyone. Well, thank you very much for coming this morning. Now we go to host county remarks and the county administrator, Mandy Hines. Good morning again.
Good morning again. The sound is all part of the master plan. It's the way to bring 2020 to a close because nothing has worked right this year.
Totally
So we can't have anything work right here today. But we're always happy to host you. We really appreciate the regional partnership that we have with the authority. We're proud to be a member government of the authority. And I don't know if I'm proud or embarrassed to say it's been about at least 15 years since I was first introduced to the Water Authority and have had varying levels of participation with the authority. And it's truly been a pleasure. And even when there is, absolute harmony and even some discord, it's all for the betterment of the region. And we really appreciate that through thick and thin, that the region is stuck together to provide this valuable resource for our region. And I do want to take just an opportunity to repeat what is our Happy New Year. Thank you, Kathy. Excuse me. But I do want to take the opportunity to say that I really appreciate the regional partnership far beyond the authority as well. So Hector Flores and Emily Lewis in Charlotte County have been great peers. Jonathan Lewis has been fantastic in Sarasota, Sherry Courtier in Manatee County. We all talk a lot and find value in having that coordination, and we really appreciate that because we all share the borders. We have employees from each of your counties that work here, and I'm sure you probably have some that commute between the two. And I know that most of my paycheck for recreation goes to Charlotte County and Sarasota as well. So we just appreciate it, and I just wanted each of you as the elected officials to know how much we appreciate your administrations and the partnership with DeSoto as well. So with that, I wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, as I probably won't see you again before then. And while 2020 may bleed into 2021 and maybe 2022, it just has to be better.
Thank you, Mindy. Appreciate your comments. Yes, it really has been a great regional partnership. Talking to Hector and Emily about what the counties and the various managers and administrators getting together during the crisis. It's been refreshing for board members to hear that cooperation. So thank you very much. Okay, Commissioners, we're now at the public comment portion of our meeting. Anyone wishing to address the authority board on the consent or regular agenda items, voting items, can fill out a card, request to speak, be given 3 minutes. If you have something else that you want to speak to that's not on the agenda, you would also be given 3 minutes at this point. Rachel, do we have any cards at all?
No, sir.
Good. All right. Seeing that we don't have any cards, last call. Very good. We're going to move on. Mr. Lehman, resolution presentation, employee recognition.
Yes, I'm dressed like the Grinch that stole Christmas and Santa Claus both, so it's always a pleasure to recognize our employees. Over the past few months, we've had to let it go a while, but today is the day that we finally get to recognize our dedicated employees that make this an award-winning authorities. Richard?
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Commissioners. As Pat said, appreciate the time you give us to do this on occasion. We're super proud of our employees, and we love the chance to show them off to you and let you hear a little bit about them. So we have 6 employees today, 3 with a 5-year service award and 3 with a 15-year. I'm going to do the 5-year service awards first and just quickly have them come up. And because of COVID, we'll just do them one at a time, get a picture with Pat, and then have them sit back down. So first up is Doug Morton. Doug, if you come up, please. Doug serves as our laboratory supervisor. He started here in 2015 when we completed the Water Quality Training Center and the laboratory. He's done a fantastic job getting the lab started, getting some certifications for us. He comes from the private sector, so he has a good private sector mindset, and he's really just done a great job hitting the ground running and keeping the lab moving. Born and raised here in Arcadia. He made the big move to Sebring when he got married. So he and his wife Erin have 3 kids, Mariah, Maddie, and Max, 22 years down to 9 years. And he loves spending time with his kids. And he also has a very interesting hobby, or I don't know if you call it a hobby, but pastime. He sits on 2 boards of directors for the Sebring 12 Hours of Sebring race. He's on the Sebring Historical Society board and the Sebring Hall of Fame board. And he's in charge of preserving all the historical data from the races and keeping the history of Sebring alive for people in the future. So very interesting hobby that he has here. And I just want to say thank you for your 5 years, and we super appreciate your work. Thank you. Get somebody to take a picture real quick. Terry, do you have a camera? Sorry. Or Ann?
Oh, my camera's not very
Nothing's working right. It's still 2020, right?
That's great.
Sorry about that. You just take a picture. I thought we were going by height.
Good.
Thanks. Okay, next up we have Mark Ortell. Mark, if you come on up. Mark's also a 5-year employee, started in October, I think, of 2015. He started as a utility worker, and he's moved quickly into operations, got his Class C license, and although it says here he has his Class C in the board book, he actually has his Class B. He just recently achieved that. So a little bit of a typo, but good news for us. Mark does a great job. He's a very conscientious operator, very quiet person. Doesn't say a lot till you get him going. But he has been married to his wife Erica for 3 years. They have 2 kids, Bryson and Kaylor. And he was born and raised in Charlotte County and has lived there his whole life. He loves hunting and fishing and woodworking. And again, thank you for your service, and we appreciate everything you did this morning. Thank you. And finally, for the 5 years is Andy Kolvinschlag. Andy, come on up. Andy is a INC technician number 2. He started as an INC Tech 1 about a little over 5 years ago. He's one of 2 INC Tech 2s with us, with the authority. He holds multiple certifications in SCADA programming and has over 13 years experience as a control systems engineer. He loves boating on the Peace River, fishing, barbecuing, and traveling. He's been to Mexico, Japan, Curacao, Aruba, and several other places I didn't recognize the names of. And he, in his words, is successfully divorced. Maybe that's why he can afford all the travel. But Andy, appreciate all you do, and thank you for your time and service. Thank you. And now for the old timers, the 15-year service awards. First up, we have Nick Godwin. Nick, come on up if you would. Nick's a Class A water treatment plant operator and also one of our shift leads at the plant. Good morning, Nick. And he also loves to travel. He's been to also some very interesting places. His list is longer than Andy's. I didn't write them all down, but there was quite a few. Paris, Greece, Switzerland, Costa Rica, Colombia. Maybe should have drug tested you when you got back from there, and Mexico. Nick also has an older Jeep that he likes to restore, and also hits garage sales and loves garage selling, so probably looking for Jeep parts. But thank you for all you do, Nick. Appreciate your 15 years of service, and always a pleasure. Next up is Donald Morton. And yes, he is the brother to Doug Morton. Donald's 15 years. Always done such a great job that we had to hire his brother and bring him in. So, but Donald started out as a groundskeeper way back in the day, and that position doesn't even exist anymore with the authority. But he quickly moved into the maintenance department as a mechanic, and he currently is our only transmission system operator at the facility, which means he takes care of everything outside the plant. He patrols the pipelines and inspects all the air releases and valves and everything outside of the facility and keeps everything in tip-top shape. And he also holds his Class 1 distribution license, which is the top distribution license that you can achieve with the state of Florida. So he's been married to his wife Lisa for 25 years. They have 2 kids and 1 grandson. And he enjoys camping, barbecuing, and gardening. And he is actually, if you recognize him from our barbecue team, he is a member of the Peace River Championship barbecue team. So, Donald, it's always a pleasure. Thank you. And last but not least, George Pennell. George getting also his 15-year service award. He was hired as an instrument tech, and he is currently our lead instrument tech over the department. He and his wife Jamie have been married for 18 years, have 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy, and he is heavily involved as a foster parent. So I want to recognize him for that. He and his wife have a passion for kids, and they take in foster kids and really have a passion for that. So I want to recognize you for that. Enjoys camping with all the kids and doing home improvement projects around the house and when you get time, sure. So, George, thank you very much for all your service and everything you do. And that's it. Thank you.
Don't go far.
I thought there was one more missing.
Yep, there is one more. Mr. Chair, the rumor has it in 2010, Pat drove up to Tampa Bay Water's office in Clearwater, lured Richard out of the building with a Bud Light, tossed him in the trunk of the car, and brought him down here. Something must have gone right, because he's still here 10 years later. Richard is our system operations manager. That means he keeps the water flowing to you. He's the man that is in charge of delivering water and making water in the system. Richard is a Class A licensed water plant operator in Florida and Georgia. In addition to keeping water flowing, Richard is very active in the national and the Florida American Water Works Association. He served as chairman of the Florida section of the American Water Works Association 2010 and 2011. He won the Fuller Award for service with the AWWA in 2014. He currently serves as the General Policy Director of the Florida section of AWWA. He's also the president of the Florida Water Resources Journal, which has nothing to do with the fact that we often make the cover of the journal, which is right there. Richard and his wife Christy have 2 children, both of them grown. And in the past year, they became proud and doting grandparents of a granddaughter. And we get to see her pretty often with pictures. So, Richard, come on down.
Middle of this time.
And I want to thank each and every one of you who received the award this morning for your service to the authority. It's really, really appreciated.
If I could for just a minute, recognizing Mandy, since we've been partners for ages, and evidently when she said she's been involved for 15 years, she blacked out those 2 years of the 37 meetings
I was just rounding.
that we had fun, that she was a party to the Master Water Supply Contract negotiations, so she lives in infamy for that.
Thank you very much, Matt. Okay, Commissioners, we're now at the consent agenda portion of our meeting. I have a couple items to pull. Commissioner Mayo, do you have anything?
No.
Commissioner Langford?
No, sir.
Mr. Simpson?
No, sir.
Okay, I'll accept a motion for the balance.
So moved, Mr. Chair. Second.
A motion second to approve the balance of the consent agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Very good. Passes unanimously. Item 8 I pulled, but really both these items are just clarification situations. Last week at our county commission meeting, item 8 came up. And very simplistically, it shows that the budget for this item, which is the cooperative funding agreement with the district on Reservoir 3, shows 1.5 million, and it's usually a 50-50 split. And as you see in the agenda documentation, the district is providing $625,000, which obviously 50% would be $750,000. So the question came up, well, what happened? So, Ms. Coates, if you could clarify, we have a clarification that was handed to us before the meeting. If you could just help us out.
Be glad to, Mr. Chair. Mike Coates for your staff. Just as background, of course, the reservoir number 3 siting and feasibility study includes, of course, the elements of siting, mitigation, looking at new reservoir intake. You see the R.D. Griffin property up there, and a number of just potential locations for a reservoir. In 2020, the board authorized $250,000 in the planning assessment to fund this. And then in October of 2019, which would have been, for the budget year 2020, we provided the Water Management District with a co-funding agreement for 2021, fiscal 2021. They're all, a year in advance for the funding cycle, and the project amount is $1.5 million. So in 2020, we did not get a funding agreement into the Water Management District. We would have had to supply that in the fall of 2018. So that portion of the project is not included in this funding agreement. The portion of the project that you see in yellow, 2021 and 2022, is included. And so that's why the authority is paying $875,000 for this project, and the Water Management District is contributing $625,000 because of that, just that fiscal 2021, 2022 funding agreement. So that's why there's a disparity there. And it's right now, Swift Mud has provided us with a funding agreement. I just got it yesterday, actually, in draft. But they're fully funding their portion of it in fiscal 2021.
Well, thank you. That clarifies it for me. I just did not have that information available to share with my colleagues on the 8th and the last meeting we had. So, fundamentally, they funded 50% of the net.
Yeah.
That was at the time they got the application. So I'll entertain a motion to approve item 8.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion second to approve consent agenda number 8. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Passes unanimously. On 14, I pulled only to just say that, essentially it's our new electronic media policy. It's updated. All that's good. It explains very well, I think, the internal dealings with this facet of the operation. Again, it was discussed at our board meeting that it might be advantageous for our staff and legal counsel to consult with each one of our county IT professionals just to discuss and then appropriately report back to the board at the right time ways that we're protecting the authority from external threats. As we all know, some governments have been attacked. I think Lee County a year or two ago was attacked through their library system, I believe, if I'm correct. So it's really interesting how they get access. So and that was all. This is fine with us. It's just wanted to make sure we got that extra task on the task list for the board as time goes on. If you all in agreement, Chair will again entertain a motion to approve 14.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second. Motion is second to approve consent agenda number 14. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
A light moment here, and I didn't want to interrupt the festivities with all the awards, but fellow with the Jeep, I've got a 1989 Comanche, fully restored, except we're desperate for the air conditioning parts. So call me directly.
That's good. All right, Commissioners, we're at the regular agenda. Item number 1, Mr. Anderson, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Richard Anderson and your staff again. My son had a Samurai, and Nick always came to me with, "Hey, I found parts for your son's Samurai." So he may well come through for you. So. Item 1, as usual, is the water supply conditions update. This month we're going to show you something a little bit different. I'm going to show you sort of an annual historical perspective as we closed out the water year for 2020 and on October 1. So I'll start out as usual. It kind of follows the same format, but a little bit different data, as I said, on an annual level. This slide shows the annual rainfall. The red bar across the top is the average annual rainfall of about 52 inches in the Peace River Basin. As you can see, 7 years out of the 10, we're pretty much average. You can see we're a little bit over, a little bit under. But if you look at 2011, that was about 15% below average. And in 2013-14, we're also about 10% below average rainfall. So over the period of time, you know, for the most part, 70% of the time we're achieving our average rainfall that we need in the basin. This slide shows the river flows. You can see if you look to the left side there, the lowest flow of the 10-year period was 113.4 billion gallons. This is in billion gallons. And that's a direct result of the lower rainfalls that you saw in the previous slide. The peak year was 2017, which is an interesting year, and I want you to keep that year in mind as I go through this. But you can see we had 462 billion gallons pass through the Peace River that year. And this shows the annual withdrawals that we take out of the river each year. And you can see it ranged over the 10-year period of a 11.1 as a high and a 9.2 as a low. And you can see that also is in 2017. And you might be asking, why did we not withdraw water when we had the maximum amount of flow? And you'll see why in just a second. This slide puts the river flow and the withdrawals on the same scale. And as you can see, the red bar is the river flow, and the blue bars are what we take out of the river. Just a tiny amount is what we harvest based on the total flow going downstream. And this looks at it as a percentage. Over the 10-year period, the low flow period back in 11, we took 8.3% of the river flow and withdrew that and put that in our storage system. In 2017, we only took 2%. And over the 10-year average, we average about 4.5% of river flow per year that we withdraw to use for water supply. And here's a look at the diurnal, the surface water storage over the 10-year period. As you can see on the left side, there's those dry years. We use the surface water storage when we need to, took water out, dipped down below 3 billion gallons in the storage system. And look at 17. Again, we had a very dry year. That was the year we had what they called the drought of the century, or Swiftmud called it the drought of the century, I guess, where we were relying on the reservoir from December through about June. So about 7 months of the year, of that water year, we took water out of the reservoir. And then, if you remember, Hurricane Irma hit. And that's where we had just an inrush of super high flows going down the river in a very short amount of time, which accounted for that very high total flow for the year. So you can see here, this kind of shows the total supply that we've used over the last 10 years. The blue bars are the reservoir and surface water withdrawals, and the red is when we have to supplement using our aquifer storage and recovery system. As you can see, 2017, again, we only took 9.2 from the surface system because of the drought and then the Hurricane Irma, but we used 1.3 billion out of our ASR system, which is the most we have used in that 10-year period. So it's there when we need to use it. And this is the last slide on the storage and supply system. This shows the reservoir level every year, October 1st. As you can see, by using the surface water storage and the ASR, we're able to start with a full reservoir every year on October 1. The only exception, again, was 2017, and we chose to bring that level down because we knew the storm was coming, so we weren't full intentionally. If we wanted to be full, we probably could have been full because there was tons of water coming down river at that time. So the take-home message is using both the ASR and the surface water, we're able to keep the system full through most, with the exception of a severe drought, we're in excellent shape and able to keep the system topped off. Now I'm going to show you the water production, and this is again on an annual scale for 2020. This goes from October to October. The authority used 28.8 or supplied 28.8 MGD to the customers. The customers did right at 44 MGD for a total of 76.4 MGD to the system. 3.6 of that went to Manatee County's consecutive customers. So the total used by the authority and customers was 72.7. And what I've done here is shown you the annual for each customer. So for Charlotte County, you used 11.1 basically from the authority, or 69% of your allocation. Used 0.46 from your bird storage facility for a total of 11.54. And you can see these are the monthly totals for you throughout the course of the year. Your peak month was March, 13.3. Your low month was September of about 10.3 as well. And for DeSoto County, similar situation, 0.54 or 79% of your allocation, 0.32 from the correctional facility for a total of 0.86 or again 60% of your total water supply capacity. Your low month was November, 0.7, and your high month was April, 1.06. And for Manatee County, I know this is a little bit confusing, but I tried to show the county usage, and then on top of that, I put your deliveries to your consecutive customers as well. So as you can see, your peak month had a super high month in November for some reason. You used 51.7 going to your customers and your consecutives. And your low month was December at 41.1. Overall, you delivered 44.63 throughout the course of the year, or 86% of your total capacity. And then for Sarasota County, Sarasota used 15.4 from the authority. That's 102% of your allocation. You imported another 4.5 MGD from Manatee County and a little bit from the city of Northport, and then self-supplied the 0.7 from your facilities. And just as a note, as Commissioner Mayo's aware, the Carlton facility is still offline, so we were able to supply the extra water to the county. It was anticipated, we knew about it, and had some great pre-planning with operations staff from the county, and it seems to have worked out very well. So total production for the month, or for the year rather, was 20.5 or 61% of your allocation. And your peak month, again, always seems to be in the springtime, 23.5, and your low month was August at 19.3. And the city of Northport purchased 1.84 from the authority, or 64% of their allocation, self-supplied 1.42, and then they supplied about 140,000 gallons. That water exchange number is what they supplied to Sarasota County, for a total of 3.13, or 51% of their allocations and capacity. Their peak month was in March at 3.9, and their low month was 2.6 in December. And looking at the regional demand, this is the total for the whole year. Again, we averaged 72.72, or 69.5% of our total capacity. When you add in the consecutive customers of Manatee, it brings it up to 76.4, or 73%. And our peak month was March at 84.8, and September was the low month of 71.2. So overall, we had about a utilization of 73% for the year, including water supplied to Manatee's consecutive customers, and about 28.3 MGD of available capacity still there to be used. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Any commissioners, any questions or comments? I just want one clarification, I guess, on the Carlton plan. Is that, I think I read in the agenda documentation, it should be up and running against early 21? Is that what you're looking at?
That's our understanding with conversations from the county staff, is early 2021. Yes, sir. Yes.
Very good.
So,
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think just a note on that. That's kind of the whole purpose of a four-county regional system. This was programmed in, and at the end of the refurbishing, actually with less components, we'll have more of the ability to produce greater volume. and when in the future we need to add those components, we'll have even an increase in volume. And I got a history lesson when I got on this board 6 years ago about other things that had happened, that water was shifted to one place or the other. And I use those examples, and now I'm going to add the Kolvin plant. When people say, why is there this need for all these gigantic pipes everywhere and all the money that's being spent? So really, on behalf of Sarasota County, thanks to the authority for this.
Thank you. You're exactly right. It'll increase our rotational capacity. It'll increase our flexibility, our ability to move water around the region. So it will be a definite plus once it's up and running. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Regular agenda item number 2, Bond Series 2020, Summary Report. Ann, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Lee of the authority staff. Over the last few months, the authority has been diligently working on the efforts for the 2010A, 2010B, and 2014A bonds for considerable savings. At the last board meeting, we presented on preliminary savings numbers and obtained your approval to proceed with the transaction, which was successfully completed on October 22nd. This time I'd like to introduce Alex Bugallo. He's the authority's financial advisor, who will be presenting on the summary of the transactions as well as the final cost savings.
Thank you. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. It's good to be in front of you right before the holidays again, and obviously it's even better when I get to announce the savings that we all incurred for the authority and its members. So let me just go ahead and start. Just to give you a quick overview again, this slide just kind of gave you a rundown as to what portion of the debt was refunded. It was obviously, as Ann just pointed out, your 2010A bonds, 2010B bonds, which were the Build America bonds, taxable with a subsidy from the federal government at the time. And your 2014A, it was originally a bank loan, and it was passed through. It was originally with Pinnacle Bank, and it was ultimately purchased by Bank of America. And the table below shows the allocation percentage of debt service paid by each member for each one of those series, which ultimately leads to how the allocation of the savings are for each one of these. I know that I've shown you schedules in the past, starting all the way in August 5th when we first got approval from the board to proceed with the refunding. And there's a lot of steps that go into a refunding, and I want to go ahead and compliment the staff. They put a lot of effort into bringing this to market as quickly as we could. I know that when we first came on August 5th asking for the authority to proceed with the refunding, there were some questions, particularly from Commissioner Mayo, to try to expedite this process as quickly as possible to get the market and realize those savings. And I can tell you that they did a phenomenal job of doing that. We were able to get the market in less than 2 months, and that includes the whole process of going through the rating agencies and everything else. And the authority not having issued any debt, really publicly traded debt in 5 years at the time, it takes time to update the thick 120-page document that it gets sent out to the investors. So, as we pointed out, we went ahead and priced the bonds on October 7th. We went ahead and closed the bonds. That's when all the monies were wired, and the old bonds were officially defeased on October 22nd. I just want to go over a little bit about what happened during the pricing. And obviously, we priced the bonds on October 7th, which is the week of October 5th. There are a couple of things I want to point out. We were getting closer to the election, which meant that there was a lot of uncertainty in the market. And a lot of issuers were rushing to get the market before the election, which we were part of that. That was our plan all along when we first brought this forward to you on August 5th. So you can see the second line on the primary market, or the first line, is the visible supply is approximately 21 billion. Just to give you an idea, the average, if you take the average number of our par amount offered in the municipal bond market on a weekly basis over the last 15 to 20 years, is somewhere between 7 and 8 billion, meaning that we were almost at triple that amount for that week. The good news, that means obviously that there's a lot of supply in the market and you're competing for the same investors as everybody else. What I will say too, in favor of the authority, is that there wasn't, even though there was a lot of volume, there wasn't any Florida paper that was comparable to what the authority was offering. There wasn't any tax exempt, high AA rated, essential service water and sewer offerings at the time. There were some other issuances, but they weren't really comparable to what the authority was offering. The bonds, the Series 2020 bonds, when we went on the morning of Wednesday the 7th, went out for pricing around 9 o'clock in the morning, opened up an order period for about 2 hours. Your staff members, Doug was there, a lot of us were there. We were able to monitor the orders as they came through. It was very well received. Again, you had it recently, you had just gotten a rating upgrade from S&P to match your Moody's rating, AA2 AA for the authority. And it was very essential service credit, highly rated, tax exempt, all the factors that you would think investors would love, and they did. The deal was very, very well received. Raymond James was the senior manager on the transaction. You had 2 co-managers, UMB Bank and PNC Bank. And both of those co-managers put in orders. UMB Bank put in some orders pretty early in the order period and brought in some good, what we would call go-away orders, as well as PNC. So if you can see at the table, we offered $52,055,000 in bonds. That's what was offered to the investors. And obviously in the maturity per maturity, all the way from 21 through 2040. And the authority received orders of about $135 million, so almost nearly 3 times as much. 2.6 times to be exact on the right-hand side. Some of the bigger players that you would expect, bond funds were the biggest contributors. Insurance companies were big. So who are the big bond funds? Vanguard was there. BlackRock participated. There were a few others. The insurance companies, Allstate, put in a significant amount of orders. State Farm put in a significant amount of orders. So a lot of different investors. In all, you had about 27 institutional investors. And the institutional buyers are the ones that buy the majority of these bonds. There were some retail orders as well from some of the member bodies within your communities. We had actually retail priority for any resident within the authority's boundaries, and those received any orders that came through individuals. Those received the highest priority, so they were filled. So there were, I think, there were about $500,000 in retail orders, true retail orders. So. What I want to say too is, going back to the slide, is the fact that we had more orders in most of those maturities. We had more orders than we were offering in bonds. That also allowed the authority and the underwriting team to bring down the interest rates that were offered at. So you were able to save probably anywhere between 2 and 6 basis points, which is 0.02 and 0.06% per maturity on those that were oversubscribed. These tables you're familiar with, we've been presenting them all along. It kind of breaks down the savings associated with each of the series that we refunded, and it breaks it down per member. If you look at the right, on the table all the way to the right, it's a debt service savings. In total, there was about $5 million that were saved. And then the allocation between, obviously, DeSoto, Northport, and Sarasota. Sarasota being the biggest share. And obviously Northport followed with about 14%, and Sarasota and DeSoto as well, with a small share. So again, these are annual gross debt service savings. They're not present value. I'll show you at the end what it means in present value in today's terms. But nonetheless, that's what you will feel in the budgetary impact of it. For the 2010 Bs, which were again the federally taxable and subsidized bonds that the authority previously had, your savings were about, that's the bulk of it, it's about almost $18 million in gross annual savings. And you see the difference there in the allocation between Northport and Sarasota. If you recall back, this is the one aspect that we had a slight change on the allocation, because there was monies coming in from Sarasota, and there was a significant amount of money coming in from Northport to bring down the size of the refunding. So the allocation percentages changed slightly, but nonetheless, the savings were allocated appropriately and were significant for the 2010 Bs. Lastly, the 2014 As, this is the bank loan. It was shorter. It wasn't as large as some of the other transactions, so the savings will be, to a certain extent, lesser. But nonetheless, total savings were about $1.7 million on a gross basis. And again, there was a few more participants in this. Charlotte received about 26% of the benefit from this as well, obviously Sarasota being the largest, and Northport and DeSoto as well. Lastly, on a present value basis, so if we take approximately on a gross annual basis, we had about $24.5 million in savings between the three. On a present value basis, based on today's dollars, it's about $13.1 million in savings from refunding those three. And you can see the allocation there at the bottom of the first table, the top table. About $416,000 to Charlotte. Sarasota, DeSoto had about $55,000, over $3 million to Northport, and over $9.6 million to Sarasota. So obviously everybody benefited according to their percentages, and this was a very successful pricing. The all-in true interest cost, which includes all costs of issuance, everything that went into this transaction, was at 2.35%. Again, present value is over $13 million, and over 20% present value savings is a percentage of the par amount that you refunded. Just to give you an idea, we've gotten very, very spoiled over the last, I would say, 10 to 12 years with refunding savings. GFOA for a long time, I've been in the business for 20 years, and for the first 10 years of the business that I was in, if you got over 3% savings, GFOA would recommend that you refunded those bonds. Well, the market has been very, very friendly in the last 10 to 12 years. And now you're seeing savings of 20%. Sometimes we present savings of 8 or 9%, and issuers are, really, should we do that for 8 or 9%? Well, that's a significant amount of savings when you think about it. You just get spoiled by the numbers that you see in here, like 20% savings. So, again, just congratulations to the staff, to the authority, and to all the member bodies who participated. All your staffs participated in updating the offering document that we had to get out to the street so we can access the investors. And everybody cooperated, and congratulations all around, and congratulations on the rating upgrade as well.
Thank you very much. Great report. Any comments or questions, Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes, first of all, maybe a slight apology due to the fact that I'm an accountant and perhaps get overly involved and overly stimulated. So I know I was on you, Alec, and I know I was pressing because I was frightened to death what we'd lose basis points as the election drew closer and nearer. But I have to tell you that your group, the other groups, and all our staff and the staffs, the finance, Office of Financial Management staffs in each of the county, this was a tremendous thing you pulled off for the authority. This is gigantic savings. I think the gross number is something like 15.9 million. And also just put into the record when these bonds are due. Are they due at the same time that the old ones were due? What's the story there? That's important.
No, we did not change any of the structure of the original bonds. In other words, actually, we did not change the final maturity. They have the same final maturity. In fact, we were able to accelerate it a little bit, and we were able to pay down some of the principal a little quicker, particularly on the 2010As and 2010Bs. Pay down the principal a little bit quicker. But the final maturities were all left the same. Nothing was extended. It was a pure refund. It wasn't like you're going from you have 22 years left on your mortgage and you refinance it with a 30-year mortgage. That's why your payment went lower. No, that's not the case at all.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other comments or questions?
Very good. Again, thank you very much. Great report.
Thank you.
Great job. Okay, we're at item number 3, legislative priorities for 2021.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I know the election's over, now it's time to jump into the legislative issues. I know in the past you're used to seeing Diane Sauls, her contract sunset, but she's now spending more quality time with her grandkids in St. Pete, something we're all jealous and look forward to doing at some point. We are leaning on Nancy Bowles, Council and Warren, who has an office in Tallahassee, Wisconsin, who spends a year's lifetime, those few months in Tallahassee. As we all know, that money is going to be short this year in the state budget, but there's plenty of other opportunities in the long term that we want to make sure sets the stage for water supply. Charlotte County, DeSoto County, Sarasota County are all scheduled for their delegation meetings coming up here in the next couple of weeks. We haven't heard manatees for meeting. But we're on the schedule for all those to present these priorities at that time. So, Ms. Miles.
Laura, good morning.
Good morning. It's been a long time being down here in DeSoto County. I'm very excited. I got reminded twice about this being the Christmas meeting because it's been so long. So I will say I have my 13-year-old snowman earrings on. because I apparently have nothing that's Christmassy. So I'm Laura Donaldson. I'm a shareholder with Doug Manson, and I have the unique opportunity where I'm a lawyer who does also lobby for some of our clients. And so since I've been working for the authority with Doug, have worked with Diane and Pat in Tallahassee to really get into the legal side of as issues come up. And so I wanted to just tell you kind of where we're at, and then I'll go through the report that you should have in all of your binders. So although there was a lot of news and stories on what's happening on the federal level, there was a lot of stuff happening on the state legislature. The Senate Republicans, who are going to be led by Senate President Wilton Simpson, who is from Trilby, Florida. He's an egg farmer as well as developer and successful businessman. They had 10 new senators elected. Several of them are former House members. 3 were very, very controversial seats, and the Senate actually gained Republican-Democrat split to 24-16, so they went up a seat. Some of the seats were extremely controversial, like millions and millions of dollars were spent in them. In the House, the Republicans are being led by Speaker Sprouse, who's from Pennell County. He's an attorney, and they gained seats, and they have a 78-42 majority. Now, they don't have enough where they can roll everything, because they're a little short. There's a threshold that basically, if the majority has that many members, they can just vote over everything dealing with rules. That has not happened. And why is this really important? It's important because redistricting is going to be happening within this term. And so, although we have seen the country moved in one direction, if you look at the Florida legislature, it has gone more conservative. And so the Republicans will be in charge of redistricting. The budget, as Pat mentioned, we have a $2.7 billion shortfall, so the B, because of COVID. And President Simpson, he just became president. President Simpson has stated it's not going to be through reserves, and that that it's not going to be tax hikes. So they are looking at everything. They're looking at education, healthcare cuts. He did state that even though there's a shortfall, environmental programs will not be cut, because we just can't cut things that we need to really delve into programs. We've also seen, in addition to the impacts on the budget with COVID, how session's gonna work. We don't quite know how it's gonna operate. I've heard rumors that members will not be able to have meetings in their offices in Tallahassee. Everything will be virtual. I know President Simpson has hired experts from USF Health and Tampa General Hospital to come up with a COVID protocol on how people can come in. So I know oftentimes I see, although you guys are always very busy with FAC, I see you roaming the halls. We don't know if that's going to happen this year, because we just don't know who's going to be allowed in the building for organizational session. They did not let people come into the building. I mean, it was very, very strict on who could come in. So we are watching that. As it relates to the state water infrastructure funding priority that's listed on your sheet, the good news is Representative Grant from Charlotte County is the House Majority Leader. So I know that he's done the appropriations in the past for the authority, so that will be good news because he's part of the leadership team. Do you want me? I'm going to go just really quickly through what's on your list, and you guys can stop me. I can talk forever on this stuff, so I'll go really quickly though. So the Potable Reuse Commission is a commission that was created by Water Reuse Florida in conjunction with AWWA Utility Council and FWEA. So basically the water utilities and the wastewater utilities created a commission, and they developed a report that was released almost a year ago dealing with how to implement potable reuse in Florida. Some of that passed this past session, and so we will be monitoring to see any other pieces that get picked up. As part of that legislation this past year, although it does not directly impact the authority, it will impact your counties. There will be this upcoming session a prohibition on reclaimed water discharges in the future if they're not beneficially reused. So you could
discharge reclaimed water into the river as long as it was for an environmental benefit, and it's just not a discharge. It was very controversial this past year. It is coming back, so I just wanted to put that on the radar. We watch all things reclaimed water just to make sure that there's no negative impacts to the authority, but that piece in particular will impact your utilities if they are doing discharges. And I will say before leaving that, this is something that President Simpson 5 years ago walked into a room with utilities and water management districts and told them $800 million gallons a day of reclaimed water is being discharged, and everyone says we need more water for water use permits. That's an awfully large water use permit. We're going to stop these discharges, and kind of like dropped the mic and walked out of the room, and all the utilities are like, ah. So this is coming. And like I said, you know, we never know what gets tagged to those type of bills, but it is definitely coming. We also have, you know, the authority has a great ASR program, and we will be monitoring any legislation that deals with ASR and changes to those regulations. There's been some concerns with DEP, and there might be a movement to help incentivize ASR programming in Florida. Part of that stems from ASR wells over with the Everglades, so unfortunately the rest of the state gets caught up in that controversy. Central Florida Water Initiative, although this region is not within the boundaries of what we call CFWI, there are potential impacts to this region, in part because many years ago, there was a thing called CupCon. It's very painful, like 2 years of meetings to get consistency between all 5 water management districts, and ultimately some of it was adopted and some of it did not pass. And there is a concern that when CFWI rules get implemented, you have the same rules within a tremendous amount of the state that are the same. And it would be very easy to have those rules adopted outside those boundaries. So that's something that we will be monitoring. That legislation will be should be ratified. So we're watching to see who's gonna play with it, because there are some very controversial impacts to public supply. Ag, it's controversial, and then ag is in a good place within the rules, but I do believe public supply is very concerned. We might actually see a real challenge coming out of that. PFAS is a big issue. There will be legislation that is going to be dealing with PFAS. I actually think we'll see kind of diverging legislation. One will be having DEP do rulemaking to adopt these standards, because right now for PFAS we just have an advisory level. And for those I can't actually say the full name, I'm sure Pat probably could. It's very long, and there's like 35, actually what did you guys get? There's like 35 different components within PFAS, is like the generic name. But we have this federal standard, and EPA is looking at adopting an actual limit. DEP has decided to start enforcement or pre-enforcement actions against utilities where this has been detected. And so because of it, some of the utilities are moving forward with legislation that will force DEP to adopt rules to set that limit. So we will be watching that. The big thing for that as it relates to the authority is the version I have seen. If a utility implements it, they are free from any liability, like a remediation program. And so we'll be watching it, because unlike brownfields, where it's within your property, PFAS loves water, and it will, flow, and we just need to make sure that someone doing something upstream doesn't ultimately harm the authority. So we will be watching what that legislation looks like. One of the items is monitoring Florida's request to assume the 404 delegation. So this has been going on for the last 3 years. It still has not been delegated. It's gotten really close. This federal government just had public meetings. Hundreds of comments in opposition were submitted. And with the change in leadership at a federal level, we do not know what's going to happen as it relates to the 404. I can tell you, people have spent hundreds of hours trying to get this 404 delegation from the federal government to the state. And so we're just going to be monitoring that. In addition, there are several governing board members from SwiftMud who have to be confirmed this upcoming session, so we will be supporting, as the authority has in the past, to get those members confirmed. Finally, and this impacts the authority as well as you as individual county commissioners, there was a bill this past session that would have created the State Local Efficiency Task Force Committee, which is supposed to look at how do we make counties, cities, and special districts more efficient. And the bill did not pass, but the very last section of the implementing bill for the budget, lo and behold, was created this task force. And so they were supposed to have their first meeting already. That has not happened. And so we will be monitoring that, because oftentimes when these task forces get together, we get some very interesting outcomes, like all special districts should go away, or things like that. So we will be watching that going forward. On a federal level, we just heard about the tax exempt bonds and the bonds. We'll continue to support tax exempt financing and preserving that ability to issue those bonds. Also continue to support the EPA dealing with security at our drinking water facilities. Obviously that's very important to ensure that the water is not contaminated. Climate change, watching the viability and sustainability of drinking water supplies. We'll continue to watch that. This is interesting, this past session, if you get state funds, depending on where you're located in the state, you will now have to do what's considered like a climate study, because they want to make sure that if the state's putting money into infrastructure, that infrastructure may not be underwater in the future. And so that's something that the state will now be requiring. And then finally, President Trump, about 45 days ago, issued an executive order creating a water subcabinet, and basically directed many of his agencies to come up with how to streamline and how to better operate and come up with a report. Although with the change in administration, we don't know what will happen with that. Those reports are due before January. But I will say that they're not all about eliminating regulations. Some of it dealing with potable reuse or water supply funding. It's coming up like, how do we deal with aging infrastructure? That's not a political issue. That is just really how do we deal with that. And so it's a great opportunity for the heads of agencies to sit in a room and come up with how do we move the country forward related to the important issue of water. So I was just very quickly going through what is on your document dealing with the legislative priorities for 2021. And I can answer any questions. I try to go through that very quickly and give you a little bit something that's not in your report. But if you have any questions, I can answer those as well.
Thank you, Laura. Commissioner, any comments or questions? I'm just curious. I put a lot of time in a couple of years ago on WOTUS, waters in the United States, and I guess that EPA and the Corps have finally got all their rules and definitions defined, except for one state. I think there's still action going on.
Correct.
Colorado or someplace. Very simplistically, have they basically got the definition back to closer to what it was historically, that their jurisdiction, the Corps and EPA, waters in the United States
Right.
being navigable waters and waters directly connected to navigable waters?
Right, so the rule, you're correct, it's valid everywhere except for Colorado, because there is a challenge to that. It has gone back to what it was, but there's more clarification.
Okay.
So it is good, but I will say with the caveat, it could be undone, because you gotta remember, this rulemaking undid the Obama rulemaking, so we could foresee the Biden administration undoing the Trump rules that undid the Obama rules. So
That's why I brought it up.
so they're in place right now, but we just don't know what's going to happen. I do know as part of the incoming administration's environmental, they have a big focus on buying conservation lands and putting money towards conservation lands. But I don't know if they they've dug down into this issue as of yet.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, fourth item on regular agenda, the strategic plan update. Gary.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Terry Holcomb with Authority staff. This presentation is an update from the strategic planning workshop that was held on September 30th. We're going to give a brief overview of the revisions that have been made from the 2017 strategic plan to the 2020 plan, as well as just run through the objectives and initiatives that were introduced at the strategic planning workshop, as well as recognizing those comments from the board members that have been incorporated into those initiatives. So in your packet, you might notice that the 2020 strategic plan, the introductory section, has been condensed. We've simplified that section by a couple ways. We've removed the section that was specific to the statutory requirement, took that out. We condensed the overview section to what you see here, the who we are paragraph. That's a little shortened condensed paragraph. We also added a map of the authority's four-county region just for geographical reference purposes. So that's the changes to that introductory section that's in the strategic plan. With respect to the vision statement, there was just one tweak here. We changed the word members to customers, so it now reads, through cooperation and collaboration, the authority and its customers shall create, maintain, and expand a sustainable interconnected regional water supply system. The mission statement primarily remained unchanged, except for we removed the very first four words. It did, those words were, it is the authority's mission to provide. We just took that off and it just says to provide the region with a high quality, safe drinking water supply that is reliable, sustainable, and protective of our natural resources now and into the future. I am not going to read all of these slides coming up. Those were just the only two. And I apologize if the print is small, so bear with me as we run through these. With respect to the core values, you'll notice that the 2017 strategic plan had 6 core values. We have condensed them to 4, primarily by combining similar core values that have the same intent. You'll notice that cooperation and collaboration has now been combined into one core value with an updated description capturing those values, as well as the regionalization and diversification core values. They have also been combined into a new core value titled Resiliency, and you can see the new definition there for resiliency. The financial stability core value remained the same with a little bit of tweaking. We added some words like integrity and transparency to that definition for the core value. And then the water advocacy core value has been updated to include leadership and water advocacy, just recognizing the importance of developing our staff for leadership within, not only within the authorities organization, but also within the communities as water advocates. So that's primarily the changes to the strategic plan. What I'd like to do now is just run through real quickly our objectives and those initiatives that were introduced at the strategic planning workshop, and just call your attention to some of the changes since that workshop. So in 2017, the authority staff as well as the member professional staffs recognized the importance behind getting action items, or in this case our objectives and initiatives, behind the core values. Basically, it's supporting activities with milestones to ensure that the strategic plan is actually executed, having dates set to things. So at the board workshop, we recognized the previous initiatives that had been accomplished since the 2017 strategic plan was implemented. And we also provided recommendations for new initiatives for each of the 4 core values. Some of these initiatives were recommended to be recurring, either annually or at a specific interval. So you'll see those identified throughout the initiatives. They're identified by that circular icon, meaning that these are initiatives we deem should be done either annually or on a recurring basis. So let's just run through real quick. With respect to the cooperation and collaboration core value, we've identified 3 objectives, and none of the objectives have changed since that strategic planning workshop. We've got 5 initiatives with those 3 objectives, and the last initiative shown, that is new since the workshop. You'll see that initiative to annually provide an update to the authority board on the strategic plan objectives and initiatives, so that is new. And we will be coming back to the board probably the December of every year with an update to how we're doing on the strategic plan. With respect to the resiliency core value, we've identified 3 objectives and 8 initiatives, including 3 that will be recurring initiatives, and they should look familiar. They were a carryover from the 2017. And as requested, the first initiative shown, we've also included an example there for clarity on what that initiative is all about. And you'll see that all initiatives, except for the last one there, they've been provided with either recurring or a milestone date for execution. And then the financial stability core value. We have identified 3 objectives with 6 initiatives, 4 of which are recurring, and the other 2 have been given deadlines or milestone dates. I'll call your attention to the first initiative under the second objective there. We added a due date by 2023, and that was at the request of the professional staff. Actually, it was Mr. Simpson with Manatee County that requested we put that due date in there. So that is also a change. And then the last core value, our leadership in water advocacy. We have 3 objectives with 11 initiatives. We're going to be very busy over the next couple of years. 6 of those initiatives are recurring. You'll see them coming year after year for updates. And the last initiative under the second objective there, that initiative 4, this is new, and it was placed in there as a recommendation from the board members at the workshop. That is engage local youth organizations, as examples, 4-H, FFA, educational organizations, in facility tours, local STEM events, and career days. So that is new since the workshop. So with that, we have just a really a one-page summary of the strategic plan. This one-page summary includes the new overview section, the who we are, a map of the region, as well as identifying the authority's vision, mission, and our 4 core values. So with that, I would like to take any questions. We would look to the board for direction or recommendations on the next steps to move the strategic plan forward.
Very good, thank you, Terry. Mr. Thomas, questions? Looks good. Very satisfied. Yeah, you come out of the workshop, you did well. I'm very pleased with it.
Thank you.
I don't know what else you need. Pat, what kind of direction?
What we would recommend is that we would take this now with a clean copy and distribute it to your administrations and back to your staff.
The management team, so to speak.
Yes, just to get more transparency, make sure everybody's online, and bring it back in I guess it's January. No, February. And because we will have at least 1 new member at that time, so we can present it to the board for adoption at that time.
Any objection to that recommendation? Got consensus?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay put.
I'll remain here for the next item.
Next item is the Peace River Regional Reservoir number 3 project that gets updated.
Mr. Chairman, Terry Holcomb, just for the record, with authority staff. This item is presented just for informational purposes only. There is no action required from the board. Work order number 1 for the feasibility and siting phase services for the Peace River Reservoir number 3, or PR3 project, was awarded in August. And with us here today, we have Ms. Katie Duty from HDR Engineering. Katie is the project manager of with HDR for this project. She will be providing the first update on the project, as well as providing an overview on the decision framework workshop that was held at the beginning of October. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Kate.
Good morning, Kate.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm happy to be here today to talk to you about this project and give you an update on where we are. So this morning, I'm going to give you just a quick, again, high-level overview of the PR3 project itself. What are we doing in the siting and feasibility phase, the current work order we've started. Dive a little bit deeper on the decision-making process we're using for key decisions on the project, and then talk about next steps. So as a reminder, this project is going to provide long-term water supply reliability. It includes three major components of infrastructure. First, a new above-ground reservoir to provide 6 to 9 billion gallons of storage, so effectively doubling the amount of storage you have right now. It'll include a new river intake along the Peace River, and then conveyance pipeline between the intake and the reservoir, and improvements to an existing pump station that connects Reservoir 1 to the water treatment plant. A quick update on the schedule. So we're currently in the siting feasibility phase, the green bar shown at the top. As Terry mentioned, that was approved to move forward in August, so we started in September. And this phase of the project runs through the end of next year, so about a year from now. Key to this phase is really providing a process to make decisions for where things go, how big they are, and how's everything configured, how's it connected, how can water move around your bigger expanded system. It's going to identify an approach for permitting and mitigation, which we've all talked about before is a really key component to the success of this project and keeping it on schedule. And it will provide an update for the cost for the total PR3 project. And at that point, it'll then establish a direction to advance the project into design and permitting. Currently, we're anticipating design and permitting starting in 2022 and taking about 3 years. That's shown in the blue bar on the graph. We anticipate bidding it in early 2025. That's the hatched purple lines on the schedule, and taking about 3 years to construct. And then, as you can imagine, a reservoir this big might take a couple of years to fill with water, depending on water availability. So with the goal of being full by 2030, we show a couple years of filling. So we mentioned that decision-making is a key part of this phase of the project. The major decisions to be made for the PR3 project include determining where on the R.V. Griffin Reserve the reservoir is going to be sited, figuring where along the river the intake is going to go and the pump station. Is it co-located with the existing intake facility, or is it located further upriver? And then once those two things are determined, we can look at where the pipeline routing goes, connecting those and bringing water to the campus. And with that, we can look at the interconnections of the existing infrastructure and the new. How is water moved around, and what is the flexibility that the operations staff will have to capture water, store water, and then treat it. And as I mentioned before, the importance of wetland and floodplain mitigation. We cannot avoid doing that, and so we need to make some big decisions about how to do that effectively. Key to our decision support process are three goals. We want this to be repeatable. We want to make sure it can be used for future decisions, or that others can follow how the steps we took to make decisions. A second goal is that we want it to be transparent. We want it to be visible. We want everybody, all the stakeholders, customers, members, to see how did we arrive at the decisions we did and why. And third, we want it to be defensible, so that it's transparent and objective, so everyone, including you, the board, has confidence in the decisions that are made for the project for the long term. So the decision process is one that allows us to balance the highest value and the lowest cost. If we just took a look at the benefits, we might end up driving the cost up of the project. If we just looked at the costs, we might end up driving or missing potentially some of the goals, such as water quality, reliability, sustainability, and affordability for the project. So we want to balance those two. So this flow chart shows our collaborative decision process. As Terry mentioned, we held the first of some facilitated workshops in the beginning of October. The workshop focused on defining objectives for each decision, and then defining criteria to be used to help make those decisions based on the objectives. We then went through and prioritized weights to each of those criteria so that we can use them later in the decision-making process. We're currently in the middle part of this flow chart looking at technical analysis and collaboration. So for each of the decisions to be made, we have to look at what alternatives exist, What are the feasibilities of those alternatives? And are there any constraints that might inhibit or work against the goals that we've defined? We'll then combine those two, the objectives and criteria, with the technical evaluation, so we can look at scoring each of the alternatives, estimating costs, and coming up with a cost-benefit ratio. We'll be back about a year from now with recommendations of all that work that will let you select the preferred alternative for each of the project decision components. An example of how this would play out would be on the reservoir siting. So objectives that could be defined or have been defined related to the reservoir decision is related to environmental and cultural, constructability, impacts to existing infrastructure, and public acceptance. Criteria, for example, that fit under constructability is related to access to the site of where these features are going to be built, available borrow, which is the soil, the earth that's going to be built, used for the reservoir, and then dewatering requirements. So each of those criteria and objectives will be compared against various sites. So this figure in the middle shows potential footprints that might be evaluated on the reserve. We'll develop a score for those, and then a cost-benefit ratio. So we held our first workshop. It was a 2-day workshop and included broad participation from across the authority. We want to make sure that we've got perspectives from all the different staff that make up the authority and will be impacted by this new infrastructure that's built. So we had perspectives from operations, land management, construction, water resources, engineering, environmental compliance, and executive leadership. The process was collaborative and really, I think everyone enjoyed it, but at first perhaps maybe didn't want to be as engaged as they were forced to be. But we started with brainstorming priorities and objectives with everyone that was there. And then for each decision, develop the weights, objectives, and criteria. From there, across all the decisions that had to be made, there were a number of common themes that began to emerge. Those themes are related to reliability and flexibility, stakeholder concerns and considerations, environmental impacts and minimizing those, considering the ease of operations and maintenance once the project is built, and constructability and access challenges during construction. So, next steps in this phase of the project, as I mentioned, we're currently working on the technical details, developing alternatives, and then next we'll compare against the criteria and objectives established from that workshop a couple months ago. From there, we'll update costs for the total project based on those alternatives. And we'll be back several times next year just to keep you updated on the process. Where are we? What are the alternatives we're looking at? And as I mentioned, about a year from now, we'll come back with recommendations from all of that for you to make a selection on project features, locations, and path forward for design. And with that, I welcome any input you may have or any questions you might have about our process.
Thank you very much. Excellent, excellent update. Commissioners, any comments or questions? Commissioner Pennell?
Yeah, just very briefly. Excellent presentation. Terry keeps us pretty informed. Our staff seems very pleased with everything you're doing. I still continue to be disappointed that you're not getting this done in 2 years.
Can't squeeze it tight.
Because I'm gone in 2 years, but I understand. And Terry quietly told me, Al, it takes 2 years to fill the reservoir. And I use that frequently with my constituents because that is a great talking point about how big this will be, how important it is, and that it takes that amount of time to just fill it after you get through all the hard stuff. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir, for your time.
Any other? No? You're good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. We are now at General Counsel report. Madison.
Thank you. Glad to be able to use the podium. I can see you as I speak to you instead of looking sideways at you. Just wanted to bring up 2 items that we've got pending. Under the services contract that you have with our firm, when litigation item comes up, there's the ability and the provision to allow for an amendment to that contract. And the litigation goes at a defined litigation rate that's attached as Exhibit B to the contract, which is a higher rate than our standard services rate for administrative services. There are 2 pending issues, contract issues, with both the Cobb and Reynolds case. which will be moving from what I would call pre-litigation administrative to more of a formal mediation over the next couple months before your next board meeting in February. So I wanted to propose to you this way this is done. I go first, but Mr. Lehman technically will make the recommendation, and then the board has to approve under the contract. So the idea would be for the Cobb case, want to go to the litigation level. That's over the building issue, and we propose a budget from December 2nd through the end of February of $15,000. Similarly, for the rentals, that's phase 1 pipeline issues that we still have pending, we would do the same thing. December 2nd through February 28th, we have a litigation budget of $15,000. Our belief is that this is basically, we hope, going to be resolved through mediation, either formal or informal, perhaps more formal with Cobb, and maybe be able to work it out with the rentals through a different type of process. But we're to the point where attorneys are writing letters to one another, and threats of litigation are being made by the outside parties. So we believe we want to go ahead and move forward and get that approval from the board.
Very good. We can, without having it on the agenda, your item is on the agenda.
Right.
We can take action today.
Yes, we can. And Pat can take the action now. I'm saying technically, formally, that he recommends we go.
I was just going to ask Mr. Lehman, you recommend this, sir?
Yes, and just to update, this is primarily on liquidated damages. Both contractors went way over the contract at the time.
That's correct.
Very good. Gentlemen, what's your pleasure?
So moved. Second.
Motion second to approve the recommendation from Mr. Lehman. Mr. Manson.
Thank you.
Together. Any discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Okay, that passes unanimously.
I don't have anything further other than to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, so I probably won't see you before then.
Same to you and your family, sir. Mr. Lehman, Executive Director's Report.
Yes, I have one item. Spookpoint has presented us an opportunity. We called back with Orange Hammock a couple of years ago. The opportunity to work with them, Sarasota County at the time, to purchase the Orange Hammock Ranch, which was adjacent to RV, and the authority would be allowed to use that for mitigation of the upcoming reservoir. That did not occur, but on the bright side, the state bought that property, so it's all good. It's still environmental authority, however, limited use of that property for mitigation. Swiftman now is looking at the opportunity to purchase the Boring Ranch, which is on the north side of RV Griffin, and they asked us about if we wanted to participate with the same process that we had on Orange Hammock. So I've included in your board book what the board had adopted before its parameters, basically up to $2 million to purchase easement over the property. We would manage the property. We would have the absolute right to do mitigation on that property on the Boring Ranch. In the meantime, and this all came about in the last 2 months, it had HDR do a quick 30,000-foot look at Morton Ranch. There was more than adequate opportunity to do all mitigation on that property. So that presents the opportunity once again, much like Orange Hammock, that the district, and I can tell you the district has made an actual offer to purchase that property. So it is ongoing. So what I would ask the board is that you would authorize the chairman, executive director to go ahead and have the negotiations, discussions with Swiftman, and base the concepts on what we'd already approved, the board had already approved on Orange Hammock, and certainly everything would come back to this board for actual adoption. If no one to go through.
Before I go to Commissioner Mayo, I just want to ask one question, just for the sake of the public. The process on Orange Hammock was to take and restore some impacted wetlands, rehydrate those, and basically that would create the mitigation for impacts that we are talking about relative to reservoir number 3. Is that correct?
Correct. And let me say that the cost savings and capital cost up front, because the option would be that we would use that land, do some restoration like we did on the RV Griffin with the original reservoir. That cost for Orange Hammock was proposed to maybe $5 million to do that work versus purchase mitigation bank, which could run anywhere from $20 million to $40 million.
I remember the presentation.
For tremendous cost savings.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner. Thank you for your patience.
Excuse me, I would move that, and if I get a second, I'd like to just have a little discussion on it.
Second. Motion second to authorize the chairman and the executive director to negotiate with Southwest Florida Water Management District for mitigation opportunities and bring that back to the board. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I mean, I'm going to repeat what you just said, Mr. Chairman, but when we were looking at Orange Hammock, Swift Mud was putting $9 million, Sarasota County was putting $9 million, and we were going to put $2 million to effect the purchase. Then there was another $2, $3, $4 million to do the mitigation on the Orange Hammock property, which would save us these credits. Now, when the state bought it, it was a tremendous thing for us because Sarasota County took their $9 million out of a lockbox that I had placed it in and is now buying other lands. I can't think of any better thing to pursue aggressively because it gagged me, it should gag all of us 20 to 50 million in mitigation bank credits that could get greatly reduced if we use the same format that we had with Orange Hammock. So this is a very big deal.
It is. I totally agree. Any other comments? No additional discussion or comments. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Hearing no one. Passes unanimously. Okay, we have our routine status reports. Any questions, comments there? I don't see any. Thank you very much, staff. And now I turn it over to Mr. Manson for the election of officers, the election of the chairman and the vice chairman.
That's correct. So at this time, we'll open the floor to a nomination for the chairman.
Mr. Chair, go ahead. Oh, he's chair.
Okay, you're chair. Okay. I'd like to nominate Commissioner Mayo for chairman.
I'll second that.
Are there any other nominations? I would do, at this time, it's already been seconded, but we didn't need a second for a nomination, but that's okay. Vote for everyone. We'll have a vote for the commissioner. Alan may become the chair. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, then congratulations. You'll be chair at our next board meeting. And take nominations for the vice chair.
Mr. Chairman, well, looking at you, that's right, Commissioner Elton Langford for vice chair.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? All right, we'll close nominations. I'll have a vote. All in favor of Commissioner Langford as vice chair, please signify by voting approval, saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So, thank you. We now have our chair and our vice chair for our next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're still
No,
January.
You're still chair. You're still chair until the meeting.
Well, that's wonderful. Board member comments. Commissioner Mayo.
Well, I do have one, and it's a very nice one. Not my usual numbers filled, long-winded. On behalf of our staff, this commission, we'd like to present you with this plaque for you make the rest of us look bad with the way you handle the chairmanship.
Thanks.
Great job, buddy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It really has been an honor. I'll have a couple of comments here before I depart the building. Mr. Langford?
Well, congratulations, Mr. Mayo, and congratulations to you, Mr. Kim. I'm glad that you got to continue to be our chairman for this year. And like Commissioner Mayo said, you do a very outstanding job, very professional, and we appreciate it. You give us a big set of shoes to fill. And with that, just like to say Merry Christmas to everybody, Happy New Year, safe travels, and enjoy your family time, and remember the reason for the season.
Thank you, sir. To you and your family, the same. Mr. Simpson, sir.
Thank you. I would kind of echo some of the comments that Commissioner made. And this one from someone who's sitting on the other side of the dais. We really do appreciate the way you've handled the meetings in the last year, and appreciate your comments. You always bring good insight, and we appreciate that. So thank you very much for your service. And congratulations, gentlemen, on coming up this year. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, as many of you know, first of all, appreciate all the kind words. This has been an assignment that I was looking forward to for a long time. And it was a struggle to get on this board, but I've really, truly appreciated the opportunity to apply my background, my experience, to try to assist the region. I think that we've done the last few years have been some really interesting accomplishments when you look back at it. I mean, the 50-year permit, although y'all got it started before I sat on this board, we brought it home. We came in for a safe landing despite the challenge from the Polk folks. It all worked out well. We're really forward to that continuing. And of course, the strides we've made with the CIP, CNA, overall, and of course our largest capital project probably in the history, it's already kicking off and getting Reservoir 3 going. So look back at it. You know, as many of you know, this will be my last meeting. Charlotte County will have a process next Tuesday to have someone else sit here. I have suggested that it be someone totally new blood, I think was the term I used last year. So we'll see how that unfolds. But I'm not going away. I'll just be changing my seating from here to out there with you folks, as I did before I became a voting member of the authority. So I thank you very much. I thank all the public, all the staff, everybody. And I do echo what the other commissioners said. I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, wonderful holidays, and stay safe and stay healthy. And the last thing I'm going to announce before I adjourn is the fact that the next authority meeting will be Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021 at 9:30 at the Peace River Water, at the facility, at the water plant on Kings Highway. So with that, any other business?
Yes, sir.
We are adjourned.